Hi everyone, and welcome to another floral photography video. I have lots of these beautiful fragile greater Stitchwort flowers blooming in our garden this month, and I would love to photograph them in situ. But the weather and my energy levels are dictating the show just now. And as you can see in this short video, it is a tad windy, which will mean it is near impossible to obtain the critical, precise focus required for such tiny flowers. You can see how small they are next to my fingers, and those stamens are only 1 millimetre wide. With the wind almost constantly blowing at around 10 miles an hour, it is highly unlikely that I will manage the precise focusing for a single photo, never mind a focus stack of 10 to 20 photos. Luckily for me, my mini home studio is always kept ready to use, and the current setup is perfect for flowers. So let's take a few inside and see if we can make the magic happen. So I've cut a few Stitchwort flowers, which are in a cup of water here, and I am setting up a flower tube full of water on my lamp stand. Next, I am checking the flowers over to find one that is in really good condition and removing any distracting dead flowers. I also use a small paintbrush to gently knock off any green flies onto the other flowers. I don't want any insects in this set of images. They move around too much. Once I've cleaned up one set of flowers, I roll up a piece of blue tack and I use this to help hold the flowers in position in a small vase of water. Then I move on to find my main flower, which I want to be in absolute pristine condition. No wilting petals, no holes and no insects. I don't want anything to detract from the simple but elegant beauty of the flower. Now yes, this is all a bit fiddly and a bit of a faff on, but I find that the attention to detail is always worth it. My next job is to prepare something to place in the foreground that will create some gentle blur or bokeh in the bottom part of the image. For this, I use a raising platform or a microscope stand that can be finely adjusted to move up or down just a tiny amount. On that, I place an old ND filter or a coaster, and that's on the top of it. And to this, I add some crumpled up foil and a few leaves, plus some of the Stitchwort flowers. Once everything is prepared, I get it all into position with one of my own printed out of focus backgrounds placed behind. I use a few books to get things at about the right height, and then I bring in my OM1 camera with the 90mm macro lens. This is sat on a mini tripod with my brand new Benro 3-way geared head. My partner bought this for my birthday, so I'm really lucky and very grateful, as I was finding it increasingly difficult to position my camera accurately for ultra macro subjects such as slime moulds, which are often only about 1 or 2 millimeters in size. This tripod allows me to make micro adjustments very easily in one of the 3 directions by turning one of the 3 large knobs. I find these so easy to use as my grip has diminished over the years. The shape and the size of these knobs allows for an easy grip, helping me to manoeuvre the camera into a precise position. So here you can see that I have everything pretty much set up as I want it. I decided to use the focus bracketing feature on the OM1 to obtain some focus stacks which I will process in Helicon software. This means that once I have chosen the starting point, the camera will move the focal point forward a tiny amount following each photograph, so that I will have a set of photographs that once combined will have more of the flower in focus, whilst I can retain the lovely dreamy blur created by shooting at f7.1. So I've set the aperture to f7.1 and I adjusted my shutter speed and ISO accordingly based on the natural light that was coming through the window on my right hand side, and that was getting diffused through the light tent. As I am using a tripod, I can use a very slow shutter speed, which ended up being 1/10 or 1/10 of a second, and my ISO changed over the course of the session between 320 and 500, just depending on how much of the sun was coming through the window. I set my focus point to the very start of the closest stamen to me and shot focus stacks of between 12 and 24 photos. I used a 4-second delay after pressing my shutter to avoid any camera shake. So now I've taken the photos, let's jump into the editing, starting with Helicon Focus. So I've gone ahead and opened a stack of images in Helicon Focus. I am going to use method C to stack these, as it is not a complicated stack, with the setting at 1 for smoothing. It takes a couple of minutes on my computer as it is a few years old, but it can be much quicker on newer machines. A larger stack of up to 1,000 images can take my computer a couple of hours to process, so I don't do that too often. Once Helicon has put the stack together, it is always worth zooming in to check if there are any aberrations or errors that require retouching. I find that there are often a sort of darker kind of halo around my main subject, which can be removed fairly easily with the retouch panel. To do this, you need to go through the stack 1 or 2 photos at a time and kind of paint in the corresponding sections from the original photo around the edge of the flower where it is sharp at the edges. So you are painting over the dark halo with part of the original photos just one at a time. It can be time consuming, but your results will look a lot better if you do this in Helicon Focus rather than finding another workaround in Photoshop. Once this is completed, it can be worth zooming in to check the details and texture in key areas such as the stamen. Flowers can move their stamens independently, and I often find that just a single stamen can move, causing errors, and this can usually be corrected in Helicon Focus. It is also worth checking the texture, and you can choose to only add in the texture and retouching if the rest of it is all okay. I also like to choose just one frame, usually the very first photo, to paint back in the background, keeping it all consistent rather than risking parts of it being different due to Helicon's processing. Next, I opened the stacked image into Camera Raw. It didn't need anything doing there, so I brought it into Photoshop. The first thing that grabbed my eye was the white area on the left edge of the frame. It pulls my eyes straight out of the image. Now there are numerous ways to tackle this, and at first I tried the content aware fill method twice and it didn't look good. So instead I selected a feathered area of green background. I copied this and I pasted it into a new layer. Then I dragged this over the white edge, dragging it into a better position and altering the opacity until I felt it looked better. I took a similar approach to the bottom left of the image. Then I moved on to removing distracting specks of dirt and pollen around the petals, using either the patch tool, content aware or spot healing brush. Next up was a quick check and adjustment of the levels to brighten the image overall, whilst double checking my whites were not too bright. And that was my focus stacked image edited. A lot of effort for such a simple looking image, eh? And then I thought, well, why not add one or two of my textures or overlays to give it a different look? Then I went to File and then Place Embedded. Then I located my enchanted texture pack and chose one of these to play with. I added a layer mask to the texture layer. Then I selected the original flower layer in the panel. I used the Select Subject tool to select the flower. Then once this was outlined, I clicked to select the texture layer again, clicking on the layer mask, and filled the flower area with black. This erased the texture over the flower. I scrolled through the blending modes to see which option would look the best, reducing the opacity at times. Then I selected a second texture and repeated the process of adding a layer mask and trying the various blending modes to see which ones I liked best. Lastly, I added an extra layer of just one texture at a very low opacity, I think it was 5%, over the whole image, just to pull it all together better. Adding a layer mask with a highly feathered area over the flower and filling that bit with black. So these were my 3 edits from this one focus stack. Now I've opened another focus stack which has already been processed in Helicon Focus. I've opened it in Camera Raw where it needed minimal adjustments, and then I've sent it straight through into Photoshop. I made some adjustments to the brightness in the levels, double checking the whites weren't too bright. Then I removed any debris and pollen from the petals, much like I did in the previous edit. There was one petal which was discoloured. It had a big discoloured blemish, and that required a bit of work to fix the discoloration. Now I do like the results on this edited focus stack, but I do like to dabble as well and add a little bit of extra. And yeah, you've guessed it, I added one of my textures. This time one from my pastel texture pack. I chose this nice warm sunny looking texture for this one. And again I added a layer mask to the texture layer and used the Select Subject on the flower layer to select the flowers. Then jumped over to the texture layer, choosing the mask. I filled the flower area with black to mask the texture out, but this time the edges just looked too harsh for me. so I used a large feathered white brush and a lower opacity to paint some of the texture back over the stems gradually, so that the stems fade into the texture better. Then I scrolled through the blending modes, altering the opacity, and I chose one that I liked. I reduced the opacity to around about 30%, as I wanted to build up the effects from the texture by using different blend modes. Often using several blend modes at lower opacities in different blend modes can give you a nicer result than just one layer. I ended up using 3 layers, each with a different blend mode. Now, I don't know about you, but I love that edit. I think it's gorgeous. Here are a few of the other focus stacks and some with textures added. If you are interested in my texture packs, then check out a link in my texture store in the description. If you enjoyed my video, then I would be very grateful if you would give a like, a comment, or subscribe to see more. I've listed all my equipment in the description, and if you use any of these links when purchasing, it means that I might earn a very small amount as an affiliate. Do look out for my next floral photography videos, which should be about photographing bluebells and cherry blossoms. So thanks very much for watching, and bye for now.